I had someone with ADHD playing in one of my games, and I'll just admit it, I failed it. You're beginning to get frustrated. You're beginning to think that this player doesn't even care about your game. This is another kind of lesser known symptom of ADHD. This is obviously absolutely not what I should have done. There are a few things we can do to keep an ADHD mind in the game. There are some huge advantages that ADHD minds have over neurotypical ones. This video is a little bit more serious than my other videos. People with ADHD do struggle to play D&D. The purpose of this video is to raise awareness of these struggles and give you, the Dungeon Master, the tools and solutions that you need so that you can try and make this wonderful hobby accessible to the people who really need it in their lives. Welcome, creators. I'm Holistic Dungeon Master, and I help DMs master their craft with helpful videos like this one, where we discover the specific struggles people with ADHD have while playing D&D, or really any tabletop, and what you can do to help them feel more welcome at your table and just enjoy the game more. If you're enjoying my content so far, then please crit the subscribe button and notification bell. Now let's get rolling. So first and foremost, a huge, an enormous, bigger than this screen, right? Disclaimer. Big disclaimer, I am not a medical or psychological professional. I'm taking all of my knowledge from ADHD, all of the kind of topics that we're going to discuss here and the symptoms and the struggles of people with ADHD from. There are a few really good scientific papers and studies that I've linked down in the description. So whatever I say here that you want to kind of follow up on, whatever piece of information, you can follow it up there. I'm also taking it from the several friends in my life. There just happens to be a lot of people in my life diagnosed with ADHD. So I've talked to them, I've asked them about their struggles, and especially the ones who have played D&D, and I've ran this script by someone who has played at my table who really struggled to get into the game because of their symptoms and their struggles with the disorder. And another little disclaimer, a little bit smaller than that enormous one that we've already talked about. Everyone's experience with ADHD is different. They can be vastly different, right? Some people get some symptoms, some people don't. It's kind of on a spectrum, right? It's unique to each person with ADHD. So the people that I've contacted while writing this script to kind of inform me a little better in the writing of it, their experience could vastly different from yours if you have ADHD. So first, just for those of you who aren't super familiar with it, let's talk about ADHD. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. According to the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, the ADDA, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder that changes how you think and process information. People with ADHD are considered neurodivergent. The chemistry and physical brain structure is different. It is different to neurotypical brains. Some of the main symptoms that you may or may not be familiar with are not being able to focus, hyperactivity and fixations, and impulsivity. Our world, almost everything in it, the vast majority of things, games, systems, jobs, you name it, are designed for people with neurotypical brains and thought processes. So people with ADHD, they often struggle to fit into these systems, and Dungeons and Dragons is no different. People with ADHD really do struggle to play the game without some accommodations. I had someone with ADHD playing in one of my games, and I'll just admit it, I failed it. They weren't enjoying, they weren't engaged, and I thought I was just doing a terrible job as a DM because they were distracted, confused about what was happening in game, and towards the end of our sessions, honestly, quite irritable. And understandably so, as they were trying their very, very best to play this game. They really wanted to play with their friends. They're trying to play this game that it just was not designed with their neurodivergence in mind. I failed them because I didn't know really too much specifically about ADHD or how to accommodate someone with ADHD at my table. Needless to say, they didn't keep playing for long, and I suspect that this was one of the main reasons, probably the biggest reason, right? That didn't sit well with me at all. I felt like I had failed my friend, I failed to accommodate their disorder, and that just made me feel bad because I want to share this beautiful hobby with all of my friends because it's such a wonderful thing to have in your life. So I researched a few ways how to make Dungeons and Dragons, or really any tabletop RPG, enjoyable and most importantly engaging for ADHD players. Since nerdy hobbies seem to attract neurodivergent minds, at least I've found this, you are bound to have someone with ADHD at your table eventually. So let's dive into some ADHD traits and symptoms and how they could make the game difficult for someone with the disorder, and what we, us, you and me, as Dungeon Masters can do to kind of counter these things. Before we get into the video any further, I'd just like to give a huge shout out to my Patreon subscribers. I really appreciate the support you're giving this channel, and it will help me make better content in the future. More info about how you can support the channel at the end of the video. When you think of ADHD, you probably don't think of inaction, or at least I didn't when I wasn't really informed about the symptoms and what life is like living with ADHD. Mostly because of the hyperactivity part, right? It's right there in the name of the disorder. However, people with ADHD can experience crippling inactivity, and it's why they might leave everything till last minute or struggle to keep up with friends and family. So in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, let's start right at the beginning. It's pre-session 0 and you've asked all of your players to send you their backstories and character sheets, right? The game is about to get started, everyone's super excited. However, you're still waiting on one player to deliver these things. Session 0 is getting closer and closer and closer, and you're beginning to get frustrated. You're beginning to think that this player doesn't even care about your game. In reality, however, they're probably very much struggling to prioritize this task, even if they do care about it immensely. If this player has ADHD, then we, as DMs, we need to make some accommodations. We cannot expect the same levels of initiative that the other players might be showing. This is a generalization, but generally this is the case. What we can do though is make this neurodivergent player feel seen. Look, they're probably already stressing out about not giving you what you need for their character. So gentle reminders, no judgments, and a willingness to receive stuff last minute from them. That is how we make them feel that there is space and understanding at your table for their disorder. We could also include some character ideas and prompts in these gentle reminders to give them a kind of a starting point, making this task seem less painful to begin. This inactivity, it's probably only going to be a major issue at the start of the campaign when you kind of need stuff from your players to get crafting the narrative. Later on, you don't need as much from them, other than kind of what they're doing at the table. But what about during the game? Short-term memory issues. This is another kind of lesser known symptom of ADHD, but it can be a very strong and significant one. My player, for example, had huge difficulty remembering NPC names, spell effects, rules, and kind of just key elements and moments in the story. I had to keep repeating myself, they seemed to be confused about what was happening, and at the time I was fairly ignorant to the symptoms as discussed, and I genuinely thought that they were almost willfully not trying to remember these things, to remember what was happening in game. To my great shame, I became actually slightly annoyed whenever this happened, and I tried to quickly recap what was going on with an air of impatience. This is obviously absolutely not what I should have done. What I should have done, and if any of you have ADHD players at this table, you should do this too, I should have prepped some handouts for them. Actual physical sheets to give them containing the NPC names, descriptions, etc. I should have either made or bought those spell description cards, you know the ones, you've seen them in stores. And actually link to those down in the description. This way the player could have just referenced these instead of having to keep asking me, who the heck is this blacksmith and why is he so mad at us? In this way, if you do this, you can eliminate the mental stress they're already under trying to access their short-term memory at the table. They're probably already struggling with this greatly and quite anxious about it. If you do this, you kind of eliminate this anxiety and remove a barrier to them enjoying the game. It's what they're there to do, right? That's your job, is to make sure your players are enjoying the game. Another thing my player used to do is constantly scribble and doodle while I was narrating. And again, I didn't really understand. I thought they were just kind of bored or that they didn't care what I was saying, but in reality, doing this stimulated them. This helped them kind of stay in game. They were doodling the stuff that was happening, right? They were scribbling things about the NPCs and stuff like that. It actually helped them be more engaged in the game. Of course, even with handouts like this, they will still probably occasionally ask what is happening in the story, but there's a very, very good reason for that. Inattentive brain. This is probably a symptom of ADHD that you know about, even if you know little about the disorder. The hyperactivity could be happening not with their physical body or what they're physically doing, but it could be happening in their minds, even while they sit still as a statue at the table. This racing of thought in their brains is what causes the attention deficit. Their attention is turned inwards, and the things outside this hyperactive mind can easily go unnoticed. This, coupled with the short-term memory issues, is why my player had to be constantly recapped on what was happening, because I was unprepared for it. It's not because they didn't care or would rather be somewhere else, or because I was doing a bad job. They literally couldn't help it. And look, we're all human. It's easy to get annoyed at a player for this inattention. But again, ADHD brains are literally wired differently to neurotypical ones. So we need to show patience and understanding. They are already struggling with the problems this causes daily, the anxiety those problems cause outside of the game. But there are a few things we can do to keep an ADHD mind in the game. We just need to make it as engaging and stimulating as possible for them. It is going to be slightly different from your neurotypical players. Sure, the physical handouts I've been speaking about already, but we can go even further with this with art handouts, music, sound effects, and keeping their players in the action. I cover player engagement extensively in this video right here, and all of these are suitable for keeping someone with ADHD stay attentive during your sessions. Another key issue that my past player mentioned to me while I was contacting them about this script, what really killed them and immediately switched their brain off from the game, right, was the waiting times. Other NPCs are role-playing for a long time, they switch off. In combat, of course, you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. She told me that this was actually physically painful, or that's how she perceived it. This waiting is physical pain almost. So if you do have an ADHD player in your game and you know there's going to be one, keep a smaller table, 3 or 4. I wouldn't say any more because that means more waiting for everyone, and for your ADHD player, that is going to be particularly painful. All of these tips and techniques that help with their symptoms might make their interaction with your game and you easier and more fun. But what about their interaction with the other players? Many people with ADHD struggle with picking up on social cues. And D&D, well, it's a social game that you play with your friends in the DM. I said that as though the DM isn't your friend. Maybe they're not, maybe they're not. So you can see where the potential problems may arise, right? More specifically, this manifests as one of your ADHD players maybe hogging the spotlight for a little bit too long, or not realizing that they're talking over others, or talking for too long. It could also lead to them interrupting important scenes between other PCs. Sometimes that could be funny, that could be just what the scene needs. Other times it could be inappropriate or steal the other player's thunder. This is a tough one to navigate, but it's our job as DMs to cultivate a good atmosphere between all of our players. So again, we must come at this with an attitude of understanding and lack of judgment, even when these things happen in game and cause problems. So I suggest trying to bring other PCs into the action if your ADHD player has been taking up too much screen time and do not realize it because they can't pick up on these social cues. You know, you could ask those other players what they think about this situation or if they'd like to do anything. You could also, if you have permission from your ADHD player to share this information, of course, to let the other players know about it, right? And just to ask them to give a little more leeway if these situations occur with your ADHD player. Remember, they are likely not doing this on purpose. They are just struggling with the social cues that the rest of your players will probably easily pick up on to determine when it's other players' time to shine. So give them a little help in this regard. Now though, we've discussed some reasons why a player's ADHD symptoms and traits could cause some issues in your game. But there are some symptoms and traits that could lend a sprinkle of magic to your table. Let me explain. Sure, ADHD minds could cause and can cause and do cause some hiccups during gameplay for a group, and certainly some accommodations need to be made. But it's not all doom and gloom for people with ADHD and the people who play with them. Navigating this hobby and indeed the world with a different way of thinking that has not been accounted for isn't easy. And even though it's officially labeled as a disorder, I just can't help but think of it sometimes as just a different way of thinking. And there are some huge advantages that ADHD minds have over neurotypical ones that not only lend themselves very well to certain aspects of the game, but can massively elevate the experience for everyone at the table. So let's have a look at a few of these ADHD superpowers. If you have players at your table with ADHD and you introduce some unique PC, a fantastical location, or even just some wacky doodad that you homebrew for your party, there is a huge chance that that player will become overly excited, much more so than anyone else, about it. ADHD minds love novelty, and the more extra it is, the better. My ADHD player was playing a wild magic barbarian and they kept rolling on the wild magic table the flumph. They absolutely loved when these little weirdos just kind of bamfed in and exploded people every time she flew into a rage. Actually, they just loved that whole random table element, right? Where anything could happen whenever they did so. And they didn't know what to expect, what was going to come next. That was extremely novel for them. If you have random tables with exciting or wacky stuff on there, then your ADHD players will just love that feeling of uncertainty and anticipation for the next novel thing that will occur. This same player also fell in love with a little myconid called Silo. I homebrewed, I use them in a bunch of my games, I just love them. But Silo cultivates groves of enormous glowing and colorful mushrooms, and I had a cute image of Silo that I just showed everyone. She loved it, she absolutely went crazy for it. She kept talking about this character. Honestly, the whole party did. Everyone loved Silo. But the thing about it was because they got so excited, so did everyone else. The thing about excitement is that it's contagious. This is one of the major benefits of having ADHD players at your table. This enriched enthusiasm and excitement, if you nourish it correctly, of course, for your awesome stuff, it just bleeds into the rest of the party, and now your creation is being shown some love, right? And isn't that just the best feeling a DM can have when you homebrew something cool, you introduce it to your players, and everyone gets hyped about it? There is no better feeling during the game, in my opinion. There is another way that your ADHD player can aid the party and infuse the game with a certain freshness. As discussed, ADHD brains are physically and chemically different to neurotypical ones, so they literally think differently, and very creatively. And this often results in divergent thinking. People with ADHD can come up with completely left field solutions to problems that most people would never ever have considered. I'm sure you can see how this will juice up your game, right? With this completely different mental process to problem solving, this can lead to the most ridiculous, so crazy it just might work solutions to even straightforward seeming problems. Those kind of in-game madcap schemes and the often spectacular successes or failures make for the most cherished memories of any party. It also gets the other party members thinking outside of the box too, especially with players who have been playing D&D for a very long time. It can just kind of bust them out of any stagnant game habits that they might have developed over the years. Your game will become a zesty one with never a dull moment if you keep them engaged with the previous tips. This is an enormous topic and I have really only just begun to scratch the surface, but if I have any wish at all for this video, it's that DMs and other players gain just a little bit of understanding about people struggling to get into the game because of their ADHD, and that they will be a little bit more accommodating when playing with them. Tabletop RPGs, playing them, it's just the greatest hobby in the world. I really believe that it offers so much for people's mental health, social health, confidence, creativity, just it's exceptional for people to play this for their minds. But look, we don't have to baby people with ADHD, right? They're just people who think in a different way. And if you make the effort to be just a little patient, this different way of thinking can infuse the whole group's experience with a fresh perspective and elevate the game to new levels. So, love your ADHD players. Be kind to them, be understanding, and help D&D not be an anxiety-ridden experience for them as they try and fit their way of thinking into a game that was not designed for them. A great way of keeping your players engaged at the table is by dropping in deep NPCs that captivate your players at every session. To help you do that, I've written a bunch of system-neutral, story-focused, archetypal NPCs with no stats or mechanics. You can just drop them into any game and start improving the narrative of it. I'm giving it away for free and you'll find it down in the description below. Also, in the description below, you'll find the link to my community Discord server where we can hang out, discuss the game, meet other DMs and players who just love D&D. We'll also be running events in there, session preps, improv games, it's gonna get wild in there. So hop right in and join the fun. You've heard a lot from me, now I want to hear from you. In fact, we all do. Please get typing in the comments down below and let us know, do you struggle to play ADHD because you are neurodivergent? Do you have ADHD? How does it impact your game? Does your DM make accommodations for you? Please let us know, what else could DMs do to make the game more accessible for you? Or are you a DM with ADHD players, and if so, how do you ensure that they are welcome at your table? Let us all know down there, please, not only so we can foster a community of DMs who help each other hone their craft, but so that we can make this hobby more accessible for neurotypical, neurodivergent, and everything in between. If you've watched this video up until now, then you are the DM that I make these videos for. Someone who is truly dedicated to being the best DM that they can be. So, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Please like, share it with the DM who has ADHD players and could use this advice. If you want to support the channel further, you'll find my Patreon down below. If you subscribe, you can really have an input to what content gets made on this channel. In fact, I'm covering this topic right now because some of my Patreons really requested it. They really wanted a video about ADHD people playing D&D, and so I made one. Or if you'd like a lovely free way to support the channel, then please crit the subscribe button and notification bell. And remember, this world needs good DMs.